To pursue a question that I put to the Minister of Environment. It took place, this question and discussion took place in November of last year, and it's only now come forward for adjournment proceedings. I'm grateful for the opportunity to pursue the matter that I raised at the time, although some time has passed. Related to the composition of government delegations to international conferences, in particular to the conference that took place in Durban, South Africa at the close of 2011. That was, of course, the 17th conference of the parties under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And I think, Mr. Speaker, the House members may recall that what occurred was a change in government policy and a decision to exclude members of the opposition from the delegation that took part in COP17 in Durban. Given the passage of time, I'm hoping that at this opportunity I'll be able to determine from the Parliamentary Secretary what the position of the government will be in relation to the composition of the delegation to COP18 when it occurs in Doha. I'm particularly interested to know whether at this point the representatives of the Minister of Environment here this evening, the Parliamentary Secretary, is able to confirm whether in fact Canada plans to participate in COP18, which will also include negotiations relating to the Kyoto Protocol. The reason for this question will be obvious to those who have been attentive to this issue. On return from Durban, the Honourable Minister of Environment announced that Canada had no intention not only of participating in the second phase of Kyoto, but that we also intended to legally withdraw. Now, there has not been, I don't think, sufficient attention to the fact that when the Minister of Environment made this announcement, he did not, in fact, legally withdraw Canada from Kyoto. That isn't possible in one fell swoop. He, in fact, put forward a letter that has gone to the UN Secretariat on Climate Change. The effect of that letter is to be a one-year notice of Canada's intent to withdraw. So this creates an interesting dynamic, if you will, for the Conservative Privy Council of this government, that the legal withdrawal from Kyoto will not take place until after the conclusion of COP18, which is taking place, as I mentioned, in Qatar, in the city of Doha. So I'm hoping to explore this evening a couple of future prospects that I'm hoping the government has considered. Will we, in fact, participate in negotiations relating to the second phase of the Kyoto Protocol, as we did in Durban, undermining progress that other nations intend to make in that second commitment period? Will we stay home from Doha? Will we, if we attend Doha at COP18, return to the practice of decades, Mr. Speaker, not merely of a previous Liberal government or a previous majority government or a previous minority government, but going back in time at least as far back as the government under former Prime Minister Trudeau, certainly the practice of former Prime Minister Mulroney, and so on through the decades until we find ourselves in a situation where opposition members for the first time were excluded by this current government. So I'll ask the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to advise, will Canada be participating in COP18? Will members of opposition parties be included? And if we participate in COP18, will we have the effrontery to participate in negotiations under the Kyoto Protocol when we've already signalled our legal intention to withdraw? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague opposite for her question this evening, and I'm glad to be able to speak to it because there is a lot of mistruths in her statement. First of all, I'll address her question with regard to the composition of the delegation leading into Durban. You know, our government has been quite clear in our approach to priorities, and that is that we have a strong mandate to ensure that our economy continues to thrive and that we see job growth in this country. And from that, I think in the lead up to Durban, we felt it was very very important for our government to speak with one voice at Durban because of the varying positions that would be in violation or in a dichotomy against that initial principle. So when we look at the NDP, they actually worked against our interests of a country by going to the United States and lobbying against our jobs in the energy sector. The Liberals have a track record of complete inaction when it came to climate change. Their government signed on to Kyoto with no plan to implement it. And also they saw greenhouse gas emissions rise under their tenure. And, you know, my colleague opposite's party has been varied in their policy stance on how to approach environmental stewardship while balancing the need for economic growth. You know, by contrast, our government has been very clear. We have said that we need to ensure that we take real action with regard to greenhouse gas emission reduction, but we also need to do that in a pragmatic way to ensure that our economy remains in a competitive advantage state. That said, we felt it was very important to have our country speak with one united voice at Durban, and that voice included the fact that we are taking strong action here at home domestically. We are leaders. The International Institute for Sustainable Development recently in a report said that our government's policy it's a good start. We're making actual progress with our sector-by-sector regulatory approach. We've seen regulations come into place in the transportation sector. We're now looking at the coal-fired sector. And we've got plans for other sector reductions and regulations as well. So number one, strong domestic approach. Number two, our government has said that the Kyoto Protocol is not something that we should just be standing still on with regard to an international approach to greenhouse gas emission reductions. We need to see all major emitters come to the table. I mean, my colleague opposite has to acknowledge that the Kyoto Protocol now includes less than 20% of the world's the world's greenhouse gas emissions at present. So we need a new agreement. We need to have all of these countries come to the table and sign on to an agreement with binding targets. We did not feel that the opposition parties had that stance. And as such, because we're proud of the approach that we're taking and because we want to see real actions, our government was proud to go to Durban and take that message forward. So, you know, with regard to some of the other questions that she's asked, we do have a very clear position. We've been very transparent. We withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol because it does not work, and the international community needs a new agreement to see real reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, we will continue on the good work that was started in Copenhagen, continued in Cancun, continued in Durban this year towards that new agreement. But we will also continue with our pragmatic, balanced, action-focused approach, a sector-by-sector regulatory approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also ensure that our economy is not competitively disadvantaged while we do that.